After my fiancé left me 3 times, I married another, and he begged me to come back. Elijah, would you come with me? The wedding hall fell into complete silence as I stood there, stunned, with the ring halfway onto Elijah Monroe's finger. His long-lost love, Julia Hart, stood up yet again, shouting across the room at him. Elijah, I'm here to take you away. Will you come with me? Without a moment's hesitation, Elijah pulled his hand away from mine, lifted his suit, and walked gracefully toward Julia. Tears glistened in his eyes, filled with an emotion I hadn't seen before, as if Julia were the one he was meant to marry today, and there I stood, the actual bride, under the glaring spotlight, reduced to nothing more than a clown in a gown. With conviction, Elijah extended his hand to Julia, his voice ringing loud and clear for everyone to hear. Julia, I will. It couldn't be more evident, Elijah Monroe, the man I loved, had been swept away by his long-lost love, Julia Hart. But I didn't feel angry. Instead, there was a strange sense of inevitability. After all, this was the 3rd time in a month that my wedding had been interrupted by Julia. I let the ring fall from my hand, its imprint digging sharply into my palm. No one moved to stop them, not even Douglas and Vivian Monroe, who sat unmoving at the head table. I just stood there, watching their little drama unfold. The first time Julia crashed our wedding, I was furious. I shouted at her with every ounce of rage I had. This was supposed to be Elijah's and my day. I had planned it meticulously, and I couldn't let her ruin it. Red-eyed, I rushed to tackle Julia, intent on stopping her from stealing the man who'd promised to be my husband. But our relatives blocked my path. Julia, standing protectively beside Elijah, smirked and said, "See, she flies off the handle at the smallest thing. She's bound to hurt you one day. Be glad I'm testing this for you, otherwise, think of how much you'd suffer in the future." In that moment, the crowd turned against me. Their whispers painted me not as the bride but as the villain. The voices surrounding me scolded me, saying it was just a test, and I had overreacted. It ended with me handing out a few hefty checks, and Elijah reluctantly agreeing to marry me again. The second time, I didn't shout, I didn't lose my temper, I fell to my knees, holding Elijah's suit, pleading with him not to leave. I loved him, and I recounted every single reason why. Julia pointed at me, disdainful. "Pathetic, you think you can manipulate Elijah with this show of weakness? You're just a coward. What do you bring to the table besides clinging to him?" Once again, I was judged and condemned. Everyone there was one of Elijah's friends or relatives. I had no family, no one to stand by me. The verbal onslaught came from every side, and Elijah simply nestled into Julia's embrace, a sweet smile on his lips. Anger wasn't enough, begging wasn't enough, everything I did was wrong, so I chose to do nothing. I stood in silence, watching. Julia's voice cut through the room once more. "See, Blair Carrington doesn't even care enough to fight for you. How could you marry a woman like that? She's failed all 3 tests. She's not worth marrying." Anger failed, pleading failed, indifference failed. What do you want me to do? Elijah's eyes flicked back to me, and he threw the bouquet at my chest. "Blair, what are you doing just standing there? I'm being taken from you. You don't care at all, do you? You never loved me." His expression was a mixture of rage and frustration. But I merely brushed off the flowers clinging to my dress, straightened my veil, and walked toward the MC, taking the microphone from him. "Elijah, go, this wedding is over." When I finished speaking, the entire wedding venue fell into silence. Everyone assumed Elijah Monroe had me completely under his control, that no matter what he did, I wouldn't end things. Elijah snapped out of his shock quickly, his eyes narrowing in rage. He grabbed a champagne glass and threw it at me, soaking my custom gown, one I had bought specifically for this day. "Blair Carrington, have you lost your mind?" he shouted. "How dare you say the wedding is off? You've got some nerve. You didn't even pass a single test, and now you say something like that. Tests. A single wedding costing tens of thousands of dollars, dresses, photography, the MC, flowers, venues, 3 weddings, costing $1 million in total." I laughed bitterly. Every cent came from me. Oh, so they were tests, not real weddings? Fine. All 3 weddings came to $450,000. Pay it back. Elijah's face fell. He couldn't possibly pay it back. Every suit, every piece of jewelry he owned, I paid for. The house his parents lived in, the car they drove, even their jobs at my company, they all came from me.